It started off, Mark and I were having a pint of Guinness and just wondering why spy movies have become so serious. What happened to the spy films that were fun? You know, we used to come out of a Bond movie or in like Flint and you pretend you got the gadgets, you'd repeat the lines, you'd play different roles with each other.
We were just chatting about Casino Royale and we were both saying it was a great movie and everything, but it was weird for an origin movie that it didn't quite give you Bond's origin. It'd been great to see Bond training and everything. And Matthew and I were just chatting about this and we were saying, yeah, that'd be really cool, you know.
There seemed to be a hole in the market, so I watched all the old spy movies and I said, yeah, we can do it. We can write a postmodern love letter to spy films and make people have fun again when they see a spy movie.
And the story very, very gradually, I mean, it took us years because we talked about setting it in America and we talked about loads of different variations of this, and then eventually it came around to this.
Much like Kick-Ass, it was one of those ones that became a comic and a movie almost at the same time or in parallel. The DNA of the two is very, very close, but the movie is not a direct adaptation of the comic. It's very much, you know, there were other things that Matthew really wanted to include and stuff that Matthew had in his mind that he wanted me to kind of work towards in the script. So the way Valentine developed really came through conversations we had and how we wanted him to be.
You know, and the movie says it, you know, the Bond movies are only as good as the villain. And the villains that you remember from the Bond films, you know, they made sense. You know, Goldfinger made sense. You know, he was when there's a sense of reality and you relate to the villains and you start liking the villains, then it becomes far more complex. That you're sort of rooting for both sides for a bit until the villain oversteps the mark, and then you know, right, spy, go save the world.
You know, we were very influenced by coming from our experience on X-Men and having dealt with, you know, what a fascinating character Magneto is, and especially what a fascinating character he can be. You know, because we'd looked at, you know, what makes him do what he does, and I think it really made us stop and think about wanting to have adversaries with more depth.
My kind of welcome.
Jane, I think, is probably the best screenwriter in the entire business. So you know it's going to be great, and what's brilliant about Jane and Matthew as well, you know, because the two of them write together as well, it's going to be better than what you gave them.
I was absolutely gagging to read the comic, but Matthew was very keen that initially during the writing process that I go with his structure. So I read the comic later and I loved it. It was a real treat.
We made one huge change. In the book, it's Jack and the hoodie kid is his nephew. And I realized, I said, this is crazy. My Fair Lady, you know, imagine Rex Harrison at the beginning of the movie went, all right, Audrey, I came from the street as well, my little niece, and I'm gonna turn you into me. You know what I mean? We did it. I've done it before. You're going, all right, well, where's the journey? Where's the art? So that's why, that was probably the biggest change I made. And then also the mass wedding, which turns into a mass slaughter. I was like, no one's going to watch a bunch of really nice people who are getting married suddenly hacking each other to pieces. I said, we've got to get a church from Kentucky.
Matthew and Jane had a backstory to the organisation that I didn't do in the comic.
Come with me.
That was born from me having a suit made at my tailor's, which is the Huntsman, where it is, where we shot it. So that's a real place. It's a real tailor that did Queen Victoria, Ronald Reagan, David Bowie, everyone, anyone who's anyone. So I'm in Huntsman getting my suit made, and I got bored out of my brains standing there and they're measuring you, and you're like, really? How big am I now? Oh, shit. And then you zone out, and then I thought, what would happen if I put my hand on that mirror and something read it and the whole thing went down, and there's another, and I'm thinking, my mind went off, and I was thinking about World War I, and in England, virtually every family lost most of their kids. And I just thought, by default, there would be all these very rich, powerful guys who all get the suits made at the same place, all know each other. It's a club without being a club. It's like a secret club. Who's your tailor? Oh, I'm a huntsman, you know, and it sort of tells you a lot about you. And I thought, if they all got together and said, look, we've all lost our kids, we're all worth billions, we've got land, we've got power, the government let us down, this war was pointless. Let's be above bureaucracy. Let's use our money, and we'll keep this shop as a front, and and we will become the ultimate defenders of humanity.
Arthur, go ahead.
Mark came up with the idea of this there is a machine that can emit a frequency that makes people just go violent.
Holy fuck! I've got a friend who put me in touch with someone at the university, and I sat with this guy and I said, like, if you had to kill 90% of the human race, how would you do it? Jeez! And his whole idea was to activate the R complex at the very base of the human brain and get your most territorial and most aggressive, and then it switches off, and within about 15 minutes you've wiped out most of the planet, you know, and they've done it for each other.
I didn't expect it to be that effective.
What kind of response are we talking?
100%.
And I said, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a good idea for a movie. And then we talked about the Gaia theory, which is that Earth is an organism and we're a virus living on the Earth, and the Earth is trying to save itself by getting rid of us.
This is great!
So I looked into that, and then I sort of got freaked out that there are more extinct species than there are living species on Earth right now.
We're making our planet thick. A coal is our only hope.
I went, okay, well this makes sense. Humanity really is screwing this planet up. The planet's been around a lot longer than humans, and I'm sure it's going to stay a lot longer. And we will probably get wiped out, and then it will continue, and then God knows, maybe the frogs or the rats will be ruling the planet. I don't know, but what I did know is a great idea for a villain to have a theory that makes sense.
Nobody told me to try and save the planet. I wanted to.
And that you sort of agree with, that politicians don't do jack shit for the, you know, politicians aren't really changing anything. The world's out of control, needs help. So he identified problems that need to be solved. His solution just isn't the right solution.
What the fuck's wrong with them?
I don't know. Could have something to do with the mass genocide.
It's exciting to be able to write characters that are as colorful, that are as complete and sort of filled out. All you really need to come in and do is, you know, dress them, find a way of making them speak and act, and you've fulfilled his dream. You know, even after you've read the graphic novel, what Matthew's done with it in his adaptation is extremely visual and just, you know, reading it. He has a way of imagining something and putting it on a page and allowing you to see it as well as he sees it, which is rare sometimes. Sometimes you have to kind of dig through the stuff to see what the writer's vision actually was, but it's pretty plain.
He takes the normal sort of run-of-the-mill spy thing that you've seen 1,000 times, and the moment you think you've got it, and you go, oh God, what's he doing? Boom. Everything is a surprise. Every single thing, the whole way along. I mean, there's a lot of stuff with that. I haven't got an enormous part in the picture, but I've read the script, of course, but there's unbelievable things that go on.
A lot of times you pick up a script, and by the time you get to page 15, you know what's going to happen on page 35, which leads you to page 70, which leads you to the end, and you might as well throw it away. Matthew is continually, you know, putting twists and turns in so that you do stay engaged and you stay interested.
There are all those fastidious moments that you recognize from those spy movies, coupled with kick-ass action, coupled with amazing sequences to do with skydiving, shooting satellites in orbit, biometric equipment that controls being able to blow people up.
Oh my God, that is fucking spectacular!
It's a kind of mix of all the best bits of the action and the spy genre.
We never wanted it to be just a straight-ahead action film. I think Matthew's intention from the beginning was that it's a spy movie, it's also a Pygmalion story, it's a number of things, and I think Matthew and I worked very much on instinct on this one and just tried to feel what was right and what fitted.
This ain't that kind of movie, bruv.
I would say it's definitely a very unconventional tone. We were both very keen to avoid any sense of parody.
I'll be right back.
And in that sense it was similar to Kick-Ass.
The hardest thing about making this movie was making sure there was a thin line between being a spoof, being a real movie, being funny, being silly, being gratuitous violence. It was, you know, it's a balancing act. All I said, it had to feel real, had to be entertaining, and had to make you smart. What makes a film good is casting it right. It's it's obvious. Either I'm watching them and I'm engrossed by how they're doing the performance, or I'm not. And as soon as I'm engrossed, I'm like, thank you very much, you got the role. And I want what they did in the room with me is what I want them to do on camera. And I'm not interested whether they're famous or not. So it's really simple casting.
I've never met a tailor before, but I know you ain't one.
When I wrote the script, I imagined David Niven playing the role.
Come with me.
So that was the role in my head. So then when I finished the script, I was like, okay, I've got to get, who's David Niven nowadays? And I don't know, it didn't take long to think Colin Firth.
I think as soon as Colin's name came up, I could not imagine anybody else in that role. He's just utterly perfect. And as rewrites happened, I started to think, so much writing for Colin, and it was honestly impossible to imagine anyone else in that role. He was so perfect.
So first things first, let's get you measured. And then whether you get the job or not, you'll have a lasting and useful memento of your time at Kingsman. I met Matthew to talk about this in, I think, September of 2012, and he'd already started to put plans in place, even though before he'd finished writing it. He wanted to have a conversation with me before he continued with the writing of it, because I think he wanted to know who might be playing the part as the writing went forward.
I was thinking, well, God, it'd be so amusing to see him kick the living daylights out of people. They'll be like, what the hell's going on, and but then with the big question mark was, could he do it? And would he do it? And would he train? And the answer is yes to all three. He worked his butt off, and it worked.
He's just mind-blowing as a physical actor. His action scenes are amazing. I mean, I think everyone knew that he'd be the perfect gentleman spy. I mean, if anything, he would have been an incredible Bond.
Yeah, he slots into it perfectly, and I think there's a sort of weight of authority to him. And just being in scenes with him, I would have paid for those classes, let alone be paid to do it. He's very kind, always kind of encouraging and reassuring, because for me it's obviously been quite a daunting process, and he's been, especially early on in the shoot when he was around more, it's the way it's mapped out is that towards the end it focuses more on my story and his was sort of focused earlier on. He kind of sort of got me through it really. He was just always there to lend support and advice. Colin's just been a really good friend. Yeah, he's a cracking fella. God, he's going to watch this, isn't he?
He has a really great wit and intellect about him. He's forthcoming and friendly. He's all those things that you want your co-stars to be, and he's very collaborative. So when we were working together, we were able to work out a lot of different things that worked for the both of us that made the time on camera very enjoyable.
Action!
In some respects, what's been nice is, although I'm, not a novice really, he's never really done a film quite like this either. Action. So in terms of the action and the fighting and all the physical elements of it, we've kind of been able to compare notes and go through it together.
Because we've learnt them in chronologically, so I've only had the choreography for about a week. I don't know who's learning from whom. I feel like I'm the one who is learning. I learn from his spontaneity, his sensibilities, his reference points, his use of language, his energy. That is invigorating for me. It's vital for me, I find, to stay connected with people at completely different ends of the generational spectrum. And I've got that here. I've got Michael Caine as a sort of a mentor, somebody I look up to. I can learn from his experience and his professionalism and the things that he focuses on and the things that I might agonize about, but he can teach me that perhaps that's not important. What's important is this. And so I'm in a wonderful position being in the middle.
It's freezing. Why are we walking?
We tested 60, 80, 90, I don't know, hundreds of actors for Eggsy. And, hundreds. And with Kick-Ass, hundreds. And both times I was saying, right, we're going to have to push the release date, the start date back because there's no one right for the role. And then Taron came in unknown and just knocked it within 30 seconds of both those guys coming in the room. I knew though I'd found my Kick-Ass and I'd found my Eggsy.
Eggsy goes through a fairly crazy journey in the film, and Not quite in the same way, but I've been through a fairly extraordinary time myself. I left drama school about 1.5 years ago. I got some sides through from my agent for an audition for a studio movie. I don't even think I had a title, it was just scenes between two characters called Harry and Eggsy. And Matthew Vaughn walked in, and you know, he's quite an intimidating chap on first meeting, so he sort of went, yeah, okay, let's go. And I just remember this agonisingly long pause, and I think it was sort of, I think it must have been about 20 seconds, which felt like a year. And he basically said, I think we'd like to get you back next week to read with Colin Firth. And I went, sorry, what? And he went, yes, Colin Firth is playing Harry.
Shut up.
And then it was within 5 minutes that I found out that Arthur was played by Michael Caine, and you know, my heart's going like this.
What happened with a lot of kids who read for the role, all I was thinking, when we get to the train sequence, the audience are going to be disappointed the train doesn't cut you in half. That's all what was going through my mind all the time. So when Taron read Eggsy, I was like, no, they're going to be worried. They're not going to want this kid being cut in half. And he read Eggsy, the street kid, well. And then when I said, right now we're going to do you playing a gentleman spy at the end, he knocked that out of the park, and it was effortless. And I tend to try and cast the role with someone who's pretty close to the role. I always cast people who I know are 90% themselves doing that role.
Taron's been amazing. I mean, he's been thrown in the deep end. He's kind of the young lead, and he's got to play street, and he's got to play posh, and he's got to straddle the divide between those two, and he's got to, you know, he's got scenes with Samuel L. Jackson and Michael Caine and Colin Firth, and he's been absolutely brilliant.
I think it's a huge testament to Taron that he's neither a street kid nor tremendously posh, and so the fact that he's so utterly believable, you know, I mean, he's an extraordinary actor.
He's worked really hard. He's had to train a lot because it's been a very physical thing, and he's been on set a lot. So I was saying to him earlier on, it's been a baptism of fire. It's the best kind of training you can have, because if you can cope with a film like this, you can do anything.
It's crazy, really, because you know, at this point, anyone's watching this now when I'm filming this interview, you know, I'm an unknown actor. No one knows who I am, and I think it's got 4,000 releases in America alone. It's obscene. But yeah, so it's been a very transitional, kind of scary but wonderful period for me.
Mr. DeVere!
Samuel.
What a coincidence.
Hey, look, him and Michael Caine, let's just be clear. Like, when I had the two of them in a room doing that scene, I was like, okay, the bucket list has had another tick on it. Yeah, he's a hero of mine, absolute hero of mine. And when I wrote the character, I imagined Valentine was young. And then when I finished the screenplay, I thought, God, maybe this isn't sort of the Jesse Eisenberg, Zuckerberg, whatever the guy sort of is called. It needs to be someone more around Colin's age, because I suddenly felt like that it's going to be the two weird dynamic of Colin with Eggsy, young guy, Colin with the villain, young guy. And I felt like, no, you know, this is Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison. And I also need someone that could make those speeches interesting, which, you know, because he had a bit of exposition to do. And there aren't many actors that can read the yellow pages and make it good, and he can.
Get down! Kill that son of a bitch! He killed all our friends!
Well, it's an interesting, Bondian take on, the world, and there are different kinds of gentleman spies. And I thought the concept was great, and I thought it would make a wonderful film after, reading the graphic novels.
I'm so sorry you had to witness all this unpleasantness due to our uninvited guest. But I promise you, by the time I found out who he works for, you and I will be the best of friends.
I actually changed my speech pattern for the film, and Matthew and I had some interesting conversations about that when I first showed up and I was doing it. He was like, why are you doing it?
It was interesting because Sam wasn't doing it as a gimmick. He said, look, I had a lisp and I had to beat it, and it's always really made me not feel good. And I reckon this character is the reason he goes to the next level of wanting to kill everyone is because of the lisp.
People tend to dismiss people who have certain kinds of disabilities. Sometimes just because, you hear somebody who speaks a certain way, or if you see somebody who walks into a room with a limp, or they're missing a limb or something, people always tend to patronize them in a certain way just because they think they're less than because they don't have everything you have, or there's something kind of off about what you're doing.
Even though he's got all the money in the world, he's powerful, he's successful, he's still's got this lisp and he knows people still don't take him seriously, so he's like, fuck him. I went, fair enough, do it.
Mr. DeVere, what a coincidence. You are the very reason I'm here.
I enjoy being in the actual Kingsman tailor shop and doing that scene with Colin and all those guys, because it had that feel of what that would be if someone like me stepped out of my world into their world. And all of a sudden, you know, guys with new money are very different from guys with old money.
What's up, my man? Richmond Valentine.
This is my new valet. I was just introducing him to my tailor.
Another coincidence.
It is thrilling to get two very, very contrasting characters and put them together, and to believe that, according to their own set of skills, they are matched, but their tools are entirely different. And to see those pitched against each other, I think is part of the dynamic which Matthew has set up.
I have a hard time understanding you people sometimes.
I like the idea of it, and I like the idea of being part of something like this since I started watching Bond films way back From Russia with Love. So it's an honor and a joy for me to be in something like this.
I had such high hopes for you. You're a bloody disgrace.
Michael Caine, I mean, the first day of filming with him, I was setting up, I was talking to the camera guys, and I suddenly heard Michael speaking, and I turned around and I thought it was a grip or someone doing a bad Michael Caine impression. I went, guys, calm it down, because I thought it's going to be embarrassing. He walks on and we're all doing, my name's Michael Caine. And I was like, oh God. And it was him. I was like, fuck, Michael's, hi, sorry, come on. And he looked at me and went, what? And I went, oh, I thought someone was doing a bad impression of you. And he's like, and he laughed, he was like, they do all the time.
Can you just untie me?
Untie yourself. It was just a script that turned up, and it turned up from someone I knew, Matthew Vaughan. He was one of the producers of Harry Brown, a picture that I did. So I knew him, but I never knew him very well. But I mean, my idea of script is, you know, the three most important things in real estate: location. The three most important things in a movie is script, the script. And I read it, and it's very, very unusual, very funny, and a big adventure, you know, and it's a real adventure film. And I'm working with lovely people, with Colin and Sam Jackson, you know, and I'm having a wonderful time.
And then with Michael, I enjoyed, you know, I was always looking forward to saying cut, because as soon as you say cut, he'll tell you an amazing story about his life. And the amazing thing he said to me was when he got, because these are my glasses, which have also become the Kingsman glasses, and he looked at me and went, yeah, I wore them as when I was Harry Palmer, didn't I? And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, they're the Harry Palmer specs.
I mean, the glasses, Michael Caine in glasses, Ipcrest file, you know, it's going to be like that. But then, of course, I'm not a Cockney, I'm very posh, and I'm the boss of the whole thing, you know, and it all terribly upper crust tie and everything, it's dark suit. But that's what's so enjoyable for me, you know. When you're young, you get the girl. When you're old, you get the part. Merlin. Come in.
We're so lucky with this film when you think about it. Mark Strong, Colin Firth, Michael Caine. It's nuts. I mean, the pedigree of the actors in this film is just nuts. Like, Mark Strong, I know from talking to other actors on other films who've worked with Mark Strong, they're feeling really good about themselves, and then they watch some of Mark Strong's rushes and all that, and they're like, oh, you know, he's so good.
The idea that the phone is receiving update texts, does it happen in this moment?
Yeah, you're looking at it, you're seeing it.
So I'm seeing it happen now. Yep.
Mark he really is glue. You know, Merlin was a very important character because he was the sort of the glue between all these crazy plots, characters, and I put him through his, you know, no other actor could have coped with, because I was like, all right, what you're going to do right now, you're looking at the monitor, everyone's heads start exploding, and it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, it's fucking spectacular, and he's like, and he's literally going, oh, that's fucking spectacular, and now you look to the left, he's doing a double flip, he's shooting, now she's falling through space, and I go to camera A, go to B, go to C, and he just does it, and most actors would have said, you know what, you're fucking crazy, I'm leaving the set, yeah, but he's a brilliant actor.
I play a character called Merlin. There's a combination in him of efficiency and toughness, but also he's a very likable character. He's the kind of sergeant major figure who likes his charges and cares about them. So there is a kind of soft side to him. He's a kind of tough love merchant. And rather than just a hard case, you could play him that way. Rather than just that, Matthew said, you know, I want there to be something about him that we like as well, you know. We're rooting for him because he's rooting for them. And that's been good to include. Yeah, it's been great fun.
You have played bingo, right?
Do I look like I play bingo?
Gazelle in particular, even though she does bad things, I'm a huge fan of as a character.
You know, it was my odd job, Jaws, and originally in the comic, we did make it a guy, and I thought, you know what, we could make this quite sexy and stylish, and if you've got blades like that, you don't have to be strong, you just have to be agile and precise, which she was. And someone showed me her Nike dancing video, how she can twist and flip and stuff, and I thought she had a great look, and I met with her and she did a great reading and got the role.
Is he dead?
Yeah.
I killed him?
That tends to happen when you shoot someone in the head.
When I arrived and I see Sam Jackson and Mark Hamill here on set, and it was my first day of shooting, I couldn't believe I was there, but yet I had to focus and do all the work, you know, but it was really exciting and it was so interesting. Matthew explained more Gazelle to me as being, you know, like a very strong woman who is lethal, and she's also Valentine's right hand, and she's very much, you know, involved in the project. And she's a double amputee, and she has extremely good access to her legs. It's not the obvious villain that you would meet there. She is the proper assistant, and she is very meticulous and neat, but she can fight. So it's a nice contrast, I like that.
Sophia said, I wish you guys would write a prequel about, you know, what had led up to that and Gazelle's life before that, and it did make me think, I don't think that'll happen, but I did think I would actually watch that movie. She's amazing, she's so compelling, she's, yeah, I can't wait to see what she does next.
You've made a mistake. I'm a university lecturer, I've got no money.
Every now and then I go, fuck me, it's Luke Skywalker. And I couldn't help it, and I thought, well, I can't show him that I'm thinking that, because you know, he's treating me with respect, so I can't suddenly go, tell me what it's like holding a lightsaber, and what was Darth Vader really like, and how did you act knowing you got the Green Cross Code man speaking in some stupid Cornish accent, and what's the new Star Wars? You know, and I just thought, I better keep a button on it, because if I unleash one question, he's in big trouble. I will lose it all, so I had to pretend that I wasn't terribly excited working with a cinematic icon and what was great is he's a lovely, lovely man and a very, very good actor. I am so glad he's going to get his second renaissance, because my God, he deserves it. And he's a good actor, he's a good guy, and I fully intend to find another role for him. If we make that a beat, guys, we might as well just do this properly. So stay down there, and you should, oh good, oh good. Right, oh good, and then hear the footsteps, oh shit, and you look that way.
You don't want me to say, oh good,
if you want, if you feel that, it's up to you.
Well, it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the comic book, because I was contacted by Mark Miller, and I'm a huge fan. I thought, what could he want to talk to me about? And what he wanted was a release to use my likeness as Mark Hamill in the comic book adaptation of Secret Service. And he said, and by the way, if we ever do the film version, which we're planning to do, would you play yourself in the movie? So I said, sure. But what happened was the script evolved into me playing another kidnapped victim, but this time a scientist.
At the point when Matthew decided he wanted to do it differently and not have it be about celebrities, you know, I don't think anyone wanted to still miss the opportunity to have Mark Hamill in the film. Everyone had been so excited about that. You know, Matthew and Mark were absolutely insistent, and I was equally excited.
What? Excuse me, I have no idea what you're talking about, please! Ah!
Which is interesting, because, you know, if I'm in a movie for 5 minutes but I'm playing myself, you understand why I'm only in it for a moment or two. Here was the idea of playing a very small part in a big movie, but as a character. But given the caliber of talent involved, you know, Matthew and Colin and Samuel, and even though I have no scenes with Michael Caine, I'm closing in on him. I'm actually in a film that he is in, so one day, hopefully, we'll actually meet face to face.
Mark and I know each other. We'd met several times prior to shooting those scenes together. We were having a lot of fun actually trying to figure out how we could both get over to the Star Wars set and see if we could audition. Yeah, just go get in line and see if anybody recognized us.
Roxanne, but call me Roxy.
And Sophie, poor Sophie, a lot of her stuff got cut out for pace, so she actually had a lot more stuff to do in the movie. But again, I thought it'd be interesting that the girl beats all these guys.
I love the fact that, you know, you could have cast a guy in Roxy's role and you wouldn't have had to change a thing, but at the same time, it felt really refreshing to me to be able to do that in the sense that it wasn't all about kicking ass and stuff, because I think we've seen that with female characters a lot, and to me I think that's a lazy way to do a strong female character.
Yeah, she's her own entity. There's no romantic storyline. It's just not over-sexualized. She's a real person, and that's what I liked. And I think maybe Matthew liked me because I played it very truthfully from the beginning. And I think a lot of women might identify with being surrounded by a bunch of males. And, you know, Roxy's fed up of that, and I think a lot of people might associate with that.
You know, the thing I loved about Roxy's character is that she isn't the love interest. And I think everyone was expecting her to be, and that was the thing that excited me most, the idea that she's the worthy opponent. She's very determined. She's in competition with Eggsy, and yet she's a good guy, and she's focused and determined. So yeah, I love Roxy, and I love how Sophie played her.
You like spy movies, Mr. DeVere?
Luckily, everybody in this film's amazing, so it's made everybody raise their game. They're all brilliant.
Everyone has enjoyed it. Everyone has had a tough time. So is it a serene experience? Not entirely. Are you grateful for it all? Yes, I think so. But I think we'll miss it.
It's a very unique take on something that is pretty much in all of our DNA. And it's just a way of looking at it from a different perspective than the traditional Secret Service or espionage film.
It's lots of super cool spies played by massive A-listers, really, yeah. And then there's little me in the middle of the vortex.
Now that's what you call the secret, right?
You know, teenagers will love it for the fact that it's got such amazing action sequences and for the story.
Son of a bitch!
And the older crowd will love it for the kind of retro feel of it, the obvious nod to the genres that it's copying and mashing up.
Stab that in.
This is mine.
At the end of the day, it's all about entertainment. We're here to give you a piece of fantasy that you can grasp and hang out in for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and hopefully when that's over, you are overjoyed and you had a good ride and you can go, wow, that was great.
I guarantee you.
And maybe, just maybe, look around and go, maybe there are too many people. Maybe we are screwing up the planet because there's too many of us. And you can look into that, and hopefully there'll be like 3 people that, out of the millions and millions of people that see this, that want to find a solution for the problem that doesn't involve killing everybody else, but involves finding a way for everybody to live here and, you know, still keep the planet intact.
My colleague died trying to rescue you, and I'm sure you saw how well trained he was, so I suggest you tell me who kidnapped you and why they paid you to keep it quiet.
Excuse me, I have no idea what you're talking about.
For God's sake, man, I barely touched you. For God's sake, man, up when you...
Great, cool. One more, really coming hard, and you start screaming. Really bring that line in earlier than it was. Yeah, Kingsman is very much I feel it's like my PhD, it's my thesis of everything I've done up to this point, from a producer and director and writer, and just being around movies for the last 20 years now, of the gangster films I've done, superhero films I've done, the spy movies I nearly did. It was just like I've said, you know what, I'm ready to put it all into one movie.
Yeah, don't go down, keep them up like.
Yeah, exactly. He is able to forage through these very familiar genres and somehow give them his own stamp. He doesn't just take them and leave them there as disparate things. He's very, very, very good at integrating them into a world which is recognizably his. But critically, he subverts them all. I think that's what is so specific to his skill in a way, is that he takes these things that he loves. He's not satirizing them and only satirizing them. It's not just a pastiche. He's not demolishing them. These are genres he loves. And in the way with Kick-Ass, he takes the superhero genre and messes with it. And I think in some ways he's taking the same mischievous and subversive approach to the spy genres.
I'll have the Big Mac, please.
Great choice.
He does everything differently to all the other filmmakers that I have had experience of in an absolutely wonderful way. I mean, he's utterly determined. He gets films made, which is extraordinary. He's incredibly instinctive filmmaker. His attention to detail is extraordinary. He's unbelievably kind of focused on set to the point where he sometimes doesn't realise you're speaking to him. Which is great. No, he's like a crazy genius, and I mean that in the most affectionate possible way.
He's great because if you flip a word or something or forget a line, he doesn't say stop, don't take and do it. He just says go back, continue, which actors love, you know, because it keeps you flowing. And he's a wonderful director for actors.
Holy fuck! So it's smash. She's gone. You're like, fuck this. You want to turn the machine back on. Up you go. You'll be really careful when you do that now.
And boom. This goes back to
back
red.
on. Woo!
Lights and lasers.
It's all good. And every now and then we'll be, Gazelle, you okay? I'm fine.
He knows what he wants to do when you come in. And a lot of directors don't have that preparedness. He's pretty prepared. But he's also very spontaneous. So when he sees things developing in the story that even he didn't see when he wrote it, but they will make the story better, he's not afraid to attack that.
I'm doing 2 extra days with things he thought up that weren't in the script. And so, but they're worth doing, you know, they're really worth doing.
Galahad, Percival, congratulations. Your candidates have reached the final stage of the testing process. As tradition allows, you now have 24 hours to spend with them. This is the 3rd film I think I've done with Matthew, and they're all great. I mean, the 4 films he's made are all great films. I really like all of them. So you know when you go and work with him that you're going to be with somebody who not only makes something that you like, but somebody that you enjoy working with.
The suit is a modern gentleman's armor. The Kingsmen agents are the new knights.
How deep does this fucking thing go?
Deep enough.
So you've got to have the depth of, and then they're walking towards you. At the moment, right? It just feels like
Robbie and me
we're here.
were talking about taking the camera here.
He constantly questions. And I think that it's a very frightening process making a film. It's very expensive, and we haven't got much time, and there are people looking at their watches. And I think that one of the dangers under that pressure is to play safe. Is to try to stick to plan A all the time, to make sure we've shot the script, because any diversion from plan A is going to unravel everything. And he doesn't have that fear. It strikes terror into the heart of everyone else. You know, you can see the color changing in the faces of people around the camera if Matthew gets another idea like this, but we're always glad he did.
Listen, I'm so sorry you had to witness all this unpleasantness due to our uninvited guests.
Our unwanted guest, just
You do want me to look?
Just look, just definitely just give it a look, so I can.
Okay. I was kind of acknowledging them before that.
He also has an amazing amount of confidence in the people that he hired. And once he sees what we're capable of, he's not afraid to challenge us in different ways that allow us and the characters to grow in a way that's beneficial to the story.
Do you know what? It'll be crime to split it instead of so we don't even have to fuck around. It'll be crime to split it, you're coming over, knock, knock, and you get there, knock, knock, knock.
Okay, so you don't want that piece.
Yeah, I think maybe you keep it in there.
We're in his world that he's created. And, you know, he's has an enthusiasm that's really infectious. You know, there's a joy to his style, you know, on set that you can't help but admire. So boundless energy. You know, I mean, he, like I say, it's a real comfort for him to be able to hold your hand and guide you through it. Because, you know, for instance, in my scene, they tell you, you know, when you're studying, try and use your own life experience in terms of how to react to things. And then you're confronted with things that you've never, ever seen in your life. It's kind of scary, and it's not that different from working in a fantasy film because, you know, you're looking at a place off camera and you know what's going to happen there, but you're not seeing it enacted in front of your eyes. You have to have this trust that he's going to take care of you.
Matthew knows exactly to the finest detail what appeals to the kid in all of us, you know? All the sort of the weapons and the gadgets and things, they just are exactly what you want to see. There's something about them down to the finest detail. They have that kind of, that sort of ingredient, that kind of X factor thing, you know, I don't know. And the decisions he makes in terms of dialogue and lines, you know, it's always what's coolest.
As a good friend once said, manners maketh a man.
I think stay back here, it doesn't feel right.
Oh,
like you stopped from that. Oh, this is, and so do it on the move. Yeah.
So there's something about Matthew's taste. He's like a dog with a bone. He won't let anything past him unless he feels it is not only right, but what he wants. And that's why I come to work knowing that whatever he chooses to put together in the edit, I'm going to really enjoy watching it.
I've always said I'm terrified of doing a movie with one central character and a simple plot, because you ain't got anywhere to hide, you know. And the great thing about the scripts we do, I mean, there's 40 minutes of really good footage that we cut out of the film, and it gives me choices, and it means I can, and as I said, it's a tonal nightmare to get it right. So the only way I can get it right is I literally have got my dial. So if I say I need a bit crazy at this point, I'll dial it up. If I need a bit more emotion, you know, I pick the scenes and manipulate the whole movie. I mean, there's always a moment in my movies where I go, I've really made a dud. Always, every time, always about halfway through the edit, you go, sure, there's a good movie in here somewhere. I'm not sure what, because when you're multi-tonal, it just takes time. You know, editing is a process that should take time. You know, Scorsese always takes a year and everyone thinks it's nuts. I'm like, I get it. That's the bit, it felt like it needed more wood going.
Yeah, okay. Splintering.
The splintering, you know, like wood cracking at that point, like.
Yeah.
He has a vision for the film, and what he imagines he wants to see on screen. And the great thing about him is that the film is financed independently. 20th Century Fox buy the film when it's finished, and they trust him to make an extraordinary, unique piece of entertainment. You know you're getting a pretty much undiluted filmmaker's vision, all the way through to every single note of the music, every texture of the visual effects, all the choices of colour in the film. So all that stuff he's made deliberate choices in, and so you're seeing that undiluted in the finished film, which is exciting for an audience, I think.
I'll actually scratch my head about what I'm going to do next, because I sort of feel like that itch is gone now. I'm ready to go into a new genre of, and I don't know what it is, but I need to do something totally different to get my mind excited.
I think Matthew has this unmatchable eye for detail, you know, things that, you know, the audience might never pick up on. They're all there, and what they do is they're these tiny little weaves which you can miss one of, but when you put them all together, all these little threads, it just makes this incredibly rich, full world. You know, I can walk onto that set and pick up one of Harry's bank statements in his office, and it's got it all there, how much money he's got in Cooch, you know, and all this sort of stuff, and no one's going to see that. It's under 3 other envelopes, you know, but I've seen it, and all that stuff, it makes the world of difference. And of course that's down to fantastic art departments and things, you know, and diligent prop makers and whatever, but it all comes from an ethos that Matthew instills, I think. So it's this amazing world that Eggsy kind of walks into.
Oh yes, very, very nice.
My name's David Chesman, I'm the prop master of Secret Service. We're at Leavesden Studios in the prop workshop. This is used for all the props sort of being delivered and then being returned or dressed on the sets, and there's probably in the region of about 10,000 items in this space, which sort of rotates every 3 or 4 days.
I've had a lot of fun with this. One of our finest examples of chemical engineering.
This is Conway Stewart pens. Conway Stewart famous because it was Churchill's pen. So the whole thing about the film being very British and, you know, real sort of London and stuff, it was that whole classic old-fashioned pens, ink pens. Remember at school the old sort of pulling the ink up. So each Kingsman, depending on what Matthew's chosen, has a different style of pen, but all in that classic, really old-fashioned classic way, but still made today, as you can see. Our character Eggsy, part of his recruitment process, ends up in a test involving a halo suit. Halo meaning high altitude, low opening. This is a halo chute, obviously parachute in the back and reserve, helmet, oxygen strapped to the leg, and altimeter. They've actually used these to jump when they did the sequence at Oxford Airport. It's been adapted to be more in our world because we've had to change the colour of the helmets. We've adapted the way the rig would fit to the person. Costume and Matthew have designed a new suit, quite a cool black tight suit with silver on. And this has been sort of, if you like, made more interesting from film-wise rather than a big chunky kind of, you know, thing that you'd use normally.
Eggsy, would you like a lift home?
Obviously, British gents you see in London always will use umbrellas. So in our story, they use a Swain and Adney, really classic umbrella, which is this one here. We've obviously just adapted it, and as you can see, it's got a gun trigger in the handle, because in the sequence he hides behind and uses it as a thing to fire with. This is the character Gazelle, and Gazelle is a double amputee. And the idea Matthew's had is that her weapons are in fact the prosthetics. So the concept was done for the character. So from this concept, we developed the idea of the shape of what it would be based on somebody's leg being about there and that being their foot, you know, from a spring point of view. And developed from that, we get into the idea of that style. Obviously this is polished stainless steel, like the concept. It was felt then that Matthew said it was maybe a bit shiny and maybe not dangerous enough almost. It looks almost too architectural. So from there, to make it a little bit more aggressive and still basing it more on that shape, we developed into that idea. Well, this particular one will be scanned by Visual Effects and then used and put in after. So you'll see these attached to the actress Sophia Boutella. So eventually you'll see this, but in terms of actually being waved around or used in a dangerous way, it would never be used in that way because obviously someone could get hurt. There'll be a scene where Sophia will pick it up as though she's taking it off. But in that case, like we do with safety blades, there's no way of ever really harming yourself. So it should never be dangerous to anybody.
Now this one, for the test at the church.
This is Valentine's case. And Valentine's case, from the concept, you know, Paul Kirby, Matthew, they look into the design and the way it's going to look. And then from there, we develop into making the prop. And we've got this now, and in case of this, he puts in a password. When he hits a given button, it powers the case. And Samuel now has control of the power and the signal going through to people's phones.
I'm starting to test now. Hope enough of these freaks have our SIM cards.
The suitcase is a test device. It's not really the device. The device is up there in that room. It's a big table that has a trigger that actually is my handprint.
Damn it! It fucking hurts!
You're the one who asked for a biometric security system.
Because I don't want anybody picking it up and doing it. And, you know, and why would you put a simple switch on something when even a bottle of Tylenol, you have to have a certain amount of physical and mental dexterity to open. You know, you can't just open it.
Our character Harry, you first see him turn up in a taxi, a black taxi. Again, that whole thing of classic British London, you're hiding in plain sight. We can't hide more in London than in a black taxi cab. Obviously the Kingsman taxi is a bit special. From the outside you've got a black taxi, from the inside obviously slightly special inside. As here we've got all the beautiful leather, walnut veneered, special windows that look like winders but are in fact electric that move up and down, cocktail cabinet, cigar humidor, telephone, special screens. So yeah, a very special taxi.
The weapons immediately obviously do feel very foreign. I've no experience of shooting, so when you're presented with these, I mean, like proper bits of kit, it does take some time to look like you know what you're doing, and hopefully in the finished result, I will do. There's always people on hand to help you, you know, armourers and stuntmen.
My name's Damien Mitchell. I come from Cohort Film Services. We supply firearms and weaponry to the film services, and we've been employed by Marv Outfit Productions to supply all the weapons you see behind us for Kingsman. Everything that we've produced and supplied for the film is in the real world. The only one exception is the Kingsman pistol, which is a custom-made pistol for the film. It's based on a real pistol, but we've added to it, we've completely refinished it and added elements to it that you would never see anywhere else.
Take it.
Now, on this film, it has been very involved. We've supplied over 200 separate weapons for the film, and that comes from our hero pistols, which I'll take you through in a moment, our private army, which we've got over 100 guys, and all these have had been custom painted. We've taken real weapons and done a custom paint job to them. This is an MP5K PDW, and this is an FN Scar L. So what we've done is we completely exploded them apart, right down to the base, and then done a custom spray job and then put them back together. These are all working weapons, but as you can see, they look great. I mean, it just gives a great contrast. We did start by snow camming with other colours, but it looked a bit messy. The nice white finish looks very clean. This weapons platform is an FN Scar L. It's a 5.56 assault rifle. Assault rifles are used all around the world by military forces. These are in theatre in Iraq and Afghanistan with American Special Forces. It's a basic assault rifle. The only people that use these are the military, no one else. This one is a HK MP5K. This is a submachine gun, so this is used for personal defence, more kind of bodyguards, presidential, things like that. Because it's folding and a lot smaller, it's a lot more compact, but also in an environment they would never use this if the stopping power is too small.
And this is our standard issue pistol. It's quite unique, as you'll see. It also fires a shotgun cartridge for use in messy, close range.
So here we have the Kingsman weapons. Now, throughout the film, all of our Kingsmen have a standard issue pistol. Everyone has the same pistol, which we've custom made. I'll show it to you now. So it's based on a Russian pistol, a TT-30, excuse me, but we've taken the frame apart and custom made a shotgun into it. Now, it does function, and we do see it used in the film. Custom grips, totally refinished for the film. For the story, we've produced 5 different cartridges, which all have different explosive, incendiary, grenade. So it gives a bit more flavour and a bit more spy to it.
Merlin. That is the students regarding the Lutzlaw position.
This one starts off in our Moroccan palace scene right at the beginning of the film. This is what our recruits use to assault the terrorists. This is an MP5 SD, which is a silenced version of the MP5. So, suppressor. Quite a fun looking thing. This is the same make, and this is HK. This is a 416. This is one of the latest assault rifles. Again, very similar to the Scar you saw before. A platform which a lot of special forces use as well. So this is a rapier battery, which we see at the end of the film. This one was borrowed from the British military, and in the real world they're used as air defence. So this was what during the Olympics was on Greenwich Hill. So that's what they're there for primarily. It is incredibly complicated, and this is just for show. They'll wheel it in, but in the actual film what they'll do is they wheel it in, and then visual effects will then take control of it in blue screen and do all the spin and the action with it.
Fire when ready.
And finally, this is our sniper rifle. This is an AI AX50, which is a high-end 50 caliber sniper rifle. You can see by the cartridge it uses. You'll see this in our accessory. One of our favourite sets is the accessory room, which we visit about in the middle of this, and you'll see all the weaponry on display. Everything from his explosive aftershave, his glasses, all his tech, and then you'll see the gun walls, which I really like.
First thing every gentleman needs is a good suit, by which I mean a bespoke suit, never off the peg.
You know, costume is what tells you what the character's all about. And then this movie's about a tailor, so even more so. And I just wanted to bring back my idea of what a modern gentleman is and sort of have a clothing range which is for people that don't want to look like their grandparents, but also don't want to look like they're trying to be teenagers.
In a way, the suit is a statement of intent as much as anything else. It says we mean business. It says we're confident. You know, there's something about the formidable nature of the silhouette of these men who are very, very committed. It's something of a uniform. It gives them solidarity.
They have bespoke double-breasted suits. They have a tie that they wear like a club tie. They have watches. In fact, I've got one now which has the Kingsman logo in it, a Bremont watch. I mean, the quality of all the fixtures and fittings, if you like, that they wear are the best of the best.
My name's Ariane Phillips. I'm the costume designer on Kingsman. The best of British for me is not only just in the costumes, embracing everything that is bespoke and Savile Row, unique to this wonderful British tradition, but it's within our storyline. You know, we have this wonderful history of British elite gentlemen spies that has won the world over for generations. So this is really a nod and a wink to that, and kind of the modern interpretation of what does that look like today. Savile Row is at the center point of our story. I really thought that the most important thing is to really live in that world and make these costumes as British as possible. So everything, all the costumes that the Kingsmen wear, all their suits are completely 100% British, from the cloth to the manufacturing to everything. It was an opportunity where life can imitate art and art can influence life. Not only do these suits have to look sharp and look great and Savile Row and be Savile Row, but they also have to work with all the amazing action sequences we have. So making a suit, that's where the movie magic comes in, and that's where we really get to work with the architecture of these clothes to make them look good and be able to move. It's a lot of engineering when it comes down to it, and a lot of fun.
Teamwork is paramount here at Kingsman.
The siren suits are what the recruits wear. And that was kind of a hybrid Matthew's inspiration to base something on what Winston Churchill famously wore, which was like basically a giant like boiler suit or onesie for an adult. And these siren suits were a lot of fun because I used it as an opportunity to show kind of all the print and pattern that I wanted to embrace from this great British textile tradition. You know, there's so many opportunities in this film to reach all sectors of British style, whether it's casual street style that we see represented with Taron Egerton's character and his world that he comes from with his friends and his family, to the bespoke world of, Colin Firth's character. So I've really got to live in this fantastic world of British style.
Is that going to fit me?
A bespoke suit always fits.
There were countless fittings we had to go through, for the shirt, the shoes are bespoke. When you put all that on, it does change you, even if Eggsy didn't assume a persona in the final scenes of the film, I think I'd still walk the way I walk in it because it does condition the way you move. You find yourself standing very straight, you sort of feel regal, really. You feel like the king of the world, you feel empowered. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is the costume does it all for you. The physical side of the film has sort of dominated it for me, really, because right from the word go when I was cast, Matthew sort of quite rightly pulled no punches about the fact that I sort of needed to trim up a little bit. Bless him for casting me, because I was a little bit doughy when we first began.
I didn't know what had hit me. I was doing about 3 hours a day every day for quite some time, learning to use parts of my body which I had never used. I didn't even know they existed. And then it started to be fun. Once I started to get acquainted with some of these moves and started to be able to do some of them, which seemed like a kind of a miracle.
Suppose asking to borrow a cup of sugar's a step too far. With stuff like this, it's a bit like learning a very violent dance, and the stunt guys that we have on this movie, as ever, are unbelievably helpful and professional and sort of hold my slightly non-violent hand.
It's not easy for me, whatever we've been doing with the stunt team. It's actually really, really hard. They taught me how to Thai box, how to do taekwondo, how to any sort of martial arts, and work also with cables. I've had to learn all these type of kicks, and it was difficult because I've never done it before. And even though I'm a dancer, it's different type of energy than dancing. You place it differently in your energy, and so that's what I had to learn, you know, the oomph, you know, of being a fighter.
3, 2, 1, action!
So it's been quite rigorous in terms of spending a bit of time in the gym and making sure I'm just fit enough, really, to do the stuff that's required of me, because it really is full on.
You know, you can do anything.
Manners maketh man. Do you know what that means?
There's a form of superpower here.
Then let me teach you a lesson.
It has that element of high action, larger than life fantasy.
Are we going to stand around here all day, or are we going to fight?
Matthew and I start with action scenes from the point of view of what are the character beats in an action scene, which is vitally important. We're both massive fans of action, but not fans of gratuitous action, because I don't think it does anyone any favours. So I think the first thing that we work out is, you know, what part of the story is this telling, both for the characters and in terms of the plot. And then it comes down to, you know, the sort of movement within the scenes, and then it comes down to individual gags. It absolutely continues to develop, and Brad Allen was a really vital part of that.
Brad, very talented guy. We sit together, plot it out. I let him off his leash, and boy, does he go to places. And then sometimes I'm like, whoa, I gotta pull you back, man. Other times I'm like, continue. And it's a very, very good working collaboration.
Brad comes from quite an oriental fighting background, so there's an awful lot of shots that feel like they run as one shot, but actually there's clever devices and ways of achieving the shots to make it look like it's one shot. So that's kind of his technique.
Set, wiping in, energy up, 3, 2, 1, action!
It's been quite an enjoyable contrast, actually, between the scenes in which I'm fairly inert. And then there's a very sharp turn when you suddenly see the action.
Freeze!
I've never done anything like it before. So they sent a team of trainers, and they're rather like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. They all have their own set of amazing skills. You know, the Jackie Chan training team, there's Brad Allen, who is one of the finest martial artists in the world. We have a Thai boxing world champion, an Olympic gold medalist in gymnastics. We're not people who can fly, but we are people who've got gadgets which can do the impossible. We have got skills which are far beyond anything that I could ever dream to have. And amazingly, because we had the means to do it, we found ourselves working with people who are pretty close to having those superpowers. I mean, these guys training me can do what to me looks like the impossible.
Action!
The first fight that you see me involved in is slick and effortless and elegant and fun.
We kind of shoot the movie before we shoot the movie, just to check that all the camera angles are going to work, and we try and get the best possible combination of camera angles, effects, and everything in there first of all, and test all that out in the studio, just in a rehearsal space with the stunt performers, you know, playing all the various characters. That way people can not only have it described to them, but they can physically sit and watch how the scene's going to play out. And at that stage, it's easy to make changes. You know?
We already know the camera angles that we're going to use. Again, you know, so when we come here, we're basically just replicating what we've already done in rehearsals. So in theory, it should be a lot quicker, but in reality, you know what you want now. So when you don't get that on the day, you just keep striving for it, and that can sometimes take a long time. But the end result is worth it, you know, in the end, because you know that if the preview looks good, you've only got to replicate that, you know, and then hopefully everyone should be happy. Colin is an absolute pleasure to work with, actually. He came in day one, and he hasn't complained once. You know, no matter how many times, if we tell him to, you know, do it again, he'll do it again. We tell him to go slow, he goes slow. We tell him to go fast, he goes fast. He literally does anything we say, no qualms, no quarrels, just straight away.
If anything, you know, he sort of just steps in and achieves it. You know, we might do a lot of takes at times, but that's partly to us, not just him, you know.
The pub fight with Colin was a situation where it was very, very advantageous, not essential, but advantageous for me to be on set cutting as they did it. And in fact, it did help because it informed the fact that we needed one additional wide shot in the sequence, which we had to choreograph and shoot on the last day. What we discovered is that we needed a shot just here. We needed a shot of Colin Firth, a wide shot of him fighting, and so this was shot right at the end. So what the sequence used to do, we would go from this. Okay, so that's all fine, but when Matthew saw that, he's like, no, we need a wide shot. We need to see one wide shot. And so we went away on the last day, we filmed this bit of action here and choreographed it so it cut in perfectly. So here, the trick of how we did this shot. So there's a guy in a green suit who's helping a stuntman do, he's not on a wire, the stuntman, he's actually doing a somersault in the air. He's doing a backflip in the air, but his leg is being pushed by a guy in a green suit, and he's landing on a crash mat on his back. Bang, there. But that's how they did that, and effectively you would key out the guy, and we ended up cutting out a little bit earlier so that you couldn't really tell he'd landed on a crash mat.
There are a lot of elements in the film that are quite interesting, one of which is it's an old school training film. You know, there is a process that this young kid from the streets has to go through in order to become one of this, you know, a member of this elite unit.
Yeah, they sort of begin this series of extremely difficult, dangerous, turbulent trials, tests, whatever, you know. The first one being on the first night, they're all sleeping happily in their bunks, and the dormitory just starts to fill with water, and the doors are locked and there's no way out.
I hated every second of filming that. It was really difficult. Everything went wrong, you can't control it. First day, the machine broke, and we were meant to only go down like 4 feet. And it went down the full 20 feet. The cameras ruined. We lost 2 cameras, sound, everything was screwed up. But it did make their actors' performance bloody good because they were scared now. You know, they were like, okay, everyone's got to concentrate.
I expected to walk on set and a sort of strapping kind of stuntman would do all the graphs. It wasn't at all like that. It was the hardest week and a half's work I've ever done in my life.
The fucking door!
I mean, I can't even imagine how many hours we spent underwater, and it was terrifying, and you know, to begin with especially, because they built the dormitory set and sort of suspended it over God knows how many tons of water, you know, and they just sink it into it.
In some respects, there's very little acting involved. It was genuinely quite scary. All of the other guys were pretending to be all macho and enjoying it, but I know they weren't. It was really hard.
You know, you can't see anything. They've lowered the set underwater to the roof. There is a roof, and you're holding your breath with these tubes, which you're not really meant to be using to hold your breath. You know, and you're thinking, shit. But you know, you feel like you're doing it.
Like, I'm not a massive, like, underwater person. I don't love being underwater. So Matthew said to me, he goes, so Digby, I hear you don't like the water. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I love the water. I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, yeah. But I've been looking at the edits and you look terrified. And I said, yeah, Matthew, it's acting. And he goes, what, before and after every take? I was like, yeah, method, character acting.
Both of these last bits of dialogue, the water's here.
Yes,
talking and then that's the way to go. We thought we were going to shoot it in 4 days. I think it took 11 in the end. Had to rewrite the whole scene. It was a much more complicated scene, and it just wasn't working. So then I was like, okay, guys, we're going to rewrite it. The hardest thing I've ever shot.
But all those hours of hard work and all that time spent underwater, there's a real joy in it being just so quick. And it's an amazing kind of distilled, crystallized version of all those hours we spent getting dunked in that tank. It's an amazing scene.
Let's talk a little bit about the skydiving. What production did in this occasion is they hired the best skydive cameramen in the world and some of the best skydivers in America and in the UK. And they would rehearse exactly what they were going to do the seconds they jumped out of the plane to the second when they pulled their chute. And they would go up in the plane, jump out, get in position, which would take them about 20 seconds, and then they would film for 20 seconds. And sometimes they would try and get 3 or 4 shots, like they would film for 5 seconds, then someone would move away, then they'd film for 4 seconds, then someone would move away, then they'd film for 6 seconds, then they'd all have to pull their chutes. So what you're watching is very, very tiny sections of this sort of 20 seconds of filming each time in order to achieve these shots, which are real. So that's why they look quite so extraordinary in the film. And occasionally we are putting the actors' faces in so that you can believe that the cast are the actual skydivers. And hopefully you believe that the actors are in that situation. So, for example...
Oh, fuck! Yes! Okay, me next.
As you can see, the actors all have these tiny cameras on their heads. The actors, the skydivers. So those cameras were all running as well as the 2 red cameras and a helicopter camera on an Arri Alexa and somebody on the ground filming up. It meant that there was an enormous amount of shot choices that I had in order to tell each tiny moment. But I would find these tiny bits of gold, like this. You see this kind of little bit here where the camera, where the helmet flashes through the frame. You get this incredible energy and immediacy from this, like here.
See you on the ground, boys.
It's just really exciting, and when they've done the sound and it's all mixed beautifully and graded, you know, it will just feel like a seamless, very kinetic, exciting action sequence, which I'm enormously proud of.
Harry! Harry, what the heck is going on?
You see sheer mayhem where there certainly is a hair out of place. And 200 people just go at each other. So I'm in the middle of all that.
I've watched bits back of the tunnel sequence that I do, and I've watched Colin's church fight back, and it is amazing, and I don't think he or I would ever have thought that we could achieve some of the things we've achieved in those scenes, you know.
Very long sequence, extremely active. I've never done anything like it before.
We're trying to do a very unique style here, that we're trying to make the whole film, or the whole fight scene, look like one shot. So there's a lot of hidden cuts, a lot of continuity problems, and it's quite tricky to get your head around. So it's taken us a lot of time to prep it, and we have had a week's prep as well in the actual church itself, which has been great, because I think if we'd have came here on the day, it'd have been a lot harder than what it is. So that week's been quite useful. We have 20 stunt guys, and we have an extra 30 special action extras, and then extras on top of that is about another 70 to 80, depending on which day it comes in. This sequence is shooting over 7 days, I think, yeah. So there's a lot to do in 7 days. A hell of a long fight for 7 days, and it is a big fight.
You know, these are sweeping moves which are aimed at camera angles and all that sort of thing. And so the camera operating was part of the dance, I mean, the big fight. So whoever's in front of that camera is selling it whole. There isn't really a lot of cheating. You're either doing it in front of the camera or it's not there. And of course that camera operator is part of the choreography as well. It was also a very gratifying exercise in teamwork.
We've had Colin now for the last sort of 4 weeks, and on average he's doing close to 3 hours a day with us, pretty much 5 days a week. So he's put a lot of effort in, and he's got a lot more stunts to do. I mean, he's been doing some quite, you know, intricate choreography and all that sort of stuff. The character itself starts off very composed, which was quite easy for Colin to do, because like, he's a very composed sort of character. So he learnt it as a dance, the fight routine, which was great for him. But as the fight goes on, he gets more dishevelled and more angry and more frustrated. And that's the challenge that we're now getting to. Now we're trying to sort of push him into this angry mode and get the whole, you know, frustration out of him.
we had to figure out how the joins between the pieces of action would work. At the end of every take, I would try and find a join that worked. So here, for example, we join as somebody wipes through the frame there. And then the other way that I help it is I zoom in on the image so that, and then zoom out again so that you can't really see where the join is. You see there, that join is almost imperceptible now. Here's another join here, for example, as Harry jumps through the air. Two people wipe through the frame. And again, a little zoom in helps just to bridge the gap. And then the other thing that I would do is we add a rage effect. If you look here at the white lines, you can see them moving, which gives you a very exciting kind of dynamic energy to the image within the frame.
I didn't expect it to be that effective.
What kind of response are we talking?
100%.
Nothing I learn in all this combat and slaying of people would probably help me if I got into a real situation, but it certainly might help me if I wanted to enter an expressionist dance troupe or something. So we are cheating. I mean, it's all illusion. This, more than anything I've ever done, comes closer to the shootout in the playground fantasy, the sort of thing that might have made acting appeal when I was 8 years old. And to have a chance to really have a crack at that now, immensely enjoyable because of that.
If you can come up with an idea for a film, and by the time you've done your deal with the studio, had the screenplay written, cast it, made it, post-production, it's usually from conception to coming out about 3 years, if all goes well, you know. A comic you normally write in 3 months later, it's out there.
One of the virtues of comics is that you can express an idea very vividly and very cheaply. And particularly if it's a slightly off-kilter idea or slightly revolutionary idea, you're not investing a whole lot of cash.
We just try out all this stuff, and if it works, it can really work, and then it blows up in other mediums as well.
Mark is a legend in his own right, and we sat down and we literally came up with the idea of in the pub for the Secret Service. And I said, who's going to draw it? And he said, well, should we try and get Dave Gibbons? There aren't many people who are famous in their own right for being a comic book artist. Christopher Nolan's favourite comic book drawer is David Gibbons. Damon Lindelof collects him, so he's we're very lucky to have him.
Oh my God, Dave is my absolute hero, right? And I'll tell you, I'll give you 2 examples. When I was 17, I queued for 4 hours to get Dave's autograph, and he was coming to Glasgow. He'd just done Watchmen, which, for people who don't know who are watching this, Watchmen is still the biggest selling graphic novel of all time. It came out in 1986-87, and it's still, all these years on, the biggest selling graphic novel ever. So he was touring to promote the book, and I got maybe 15 seconds with him, but I went home delighted. And he did me a very quick sketch as well, which I still have. I had it up in my room for ages, and I wrote him a letter about a year later.
Mark wrote me a fan letter when he was 17 years old. I was a little older than that at the time, and he told me that the best thing to do for my career was to work with him.
I was like one of those Mad X Factor contestants, that says, I want to be Beyonce, it was like that kind of thing. And I was saying, oh, you should come and work with me, I'm going to be a massive writer and everything.
And I've got no memory of it. I wrote him back a very polite letter and sent him a sketch and said, yeah, thanks, but perhaps not now, maybe in the future.
And I've still got it, and it was so exciting just getting to know Dave over the years, and we became friends when I was in my 20s, and by the time I was in my 30s, I began to sort of establish a career for myself.
By which time I'd become a huge fan of his, with the work that he'd done on things like the Ultimates and stuff like that.
And Dave was saying, oh, we should maybe do something at some point, and then all these years later we finally did, and I would have done it free of charge. I had such a treat working with him.
And there were a number of possible projects, and the one that he pitched to me was the Secret Service, and I think I was expecting a superhero project, But actually, the more I thought about it, the more I liked the idea of doing something that wasn't a superhero thing. And I particularly liked the fact that that it was set in England and that it was a chance to play off the kind of Englishness of things rather than being sat as these things usually are in the States. So that really attracted me to it, and we just kind of went from there.
Before I knew I wanted Dave for this project, I knew it had to be a British guy because the bulk of comic book artists are American. And I thought somebody from overseas would completely ruin this. Like, they're not going to be able to tell the subtleties of like an English street kid. But you know, Dave would get the hairstyles and the clothes and the environment perfect. You know, where an American artist would draw thatched roofs and things. You know, and sheep in London and things like that. It would just all be completely wrong. And somebody looking like John Bull and everything. It would just be disastrous. You know, but I knew I wanted a British guy, and I thought, let's start at the top.
There's something about drawing something set in England that does give it authenticity, that you're actually in the same way being analytical and picking on things that other people don't necessarily see, but you know when it rings true to you as an insider in that society. And I suppose also with a thing like Secret Service, which in a sense is kind of Pygmalion with secret agents, that again you're playing off the class thing, where in England you immediately know somebody's class by the way they talk, which is a thing you don't necessarily have in the States. So it's a whole different set of ground rules and a whole different set of things that you can play off. And so it fell to me as the artist to make sure that the things that I drew appeared real, that South London did look like South London, that the kids looked believable, that if there was a car chase, it was the right kind of car that they'd nick and it was a believable police car. So although it's great to make things up from your imagination, there's nothing that's really quite so exciting as things that are grounded in reality. And even if you exaggerate the reality, it always has to stay kind of feasible. So if you're going to have people flying around with jetpacks and ejector seats and all the wonderful technology that we see in Secret Service, the fact that it's a believable South London, that the kids look believable, that the storefronts are South London storefronts, that the cars fit, you know, that's a really important thing to sustain and feed the fantasy.
So, I mean, the great thing about somebody who's obviously as good as Dave is that he doesn't need a huge amount of direction, you know, so he knew who, from reading the story, he knew who the Eggsy Gary character was, you know, and he instantly got this guy, the other guy was a more mature James Bond type, you know, and he sent me some sketches, I was like, perfect, and that was it.
And I just drew what I drew, and he saw what I drew and said, fine, and I looked at his scripts and said, fine.
You know, it could not have been easier, you know.
Mark has got a grasp of not only story, but of moments that stay with you. And I think that's a kind of, in a sense, a cinematic skill as well. All the great movies have got moments or speeches that you remember. And I think Mark's work has got these wonderful landmarks. And he's still got that thing which to me characterises the best comics, which is to be slightly subversive. I mean, even with Watchmen, which is, you know, the Citizen Kane of comics, or whatever you like to call it, it's the element of subversion in it, of confounding people's expectations, that I think is a real hallmark of interesting fiction.
Matthew and Jane had a backstory to the organisation that I didn't do in the comic. That's something that was specifically made up for the movie, but I thought it was a good one. You know, for me it was literally the Secret Service. You know, for me it was part of the, the military intelligence. But Matthew and Jane wanted to sort of make it something that was slightly less governmental. You know, something that was a bit more maybe like the stuff that you got in 1960s television programmes. Like, you didn't quite know who Steed and Mrs. Peel worked for and everything. And I think it goes back a little more to those kind of like ITC programmes of the 1960s, this kind of mysterious organisation that they worked for. And I thought that was pretty cool. It had an unusual vibe that I hadn't seen in a long time.
What might work in a comic or a book, if it's not going to work in the film, you don't do it. You know, I co-created it, so I'm going to be incredibly respectful to it. But likewise with Kick-Ass, I changed a lot for the film.
I mean, honestly, Mark, when he wrote the comic, added a lot of stuff independently, which was where the story took him. I mean, he and Matthew had discussed this idea, but really the comic Mark had written completely independently, and so his imagination took him to other places.
One of the big storylines in the comic was that a bunch of celebrities were being kidnapped by Samuel L. Jackson's character. And the opening sequence was Mark Hamill being kidnapped, but it was Mark Hamill himself.
And I thought does Mark mean Mark Hamill or somebody who looks like Mark Hamill? But no, it was Mark Hamill. And I thought, this is so bizarre.
The comic then got drawn by Dave with Mark Hamill, and I was like, oh, I should really contact Mark Hamill at some point and make sure this is okay with him. And it literally went right up to the night before the comic was going to the printers, and I just remembered I didn't have his permission, and I didn't know Mark Hamill, right? But luckily he was a friend of a friend, right? And I managed to get his phone number, right?
So I got on the phone with him and I said, well, what do you have in mind? And he said, well, I'm working with the artist Dave Gibbons. Again, I'm a huge fan of both these guys. Mark for his writing, David for his artwork. I'm a huge Watchmen fan, so I was sort of honored and wondering how I'd be rendered by this artist that I knew so well. But he said, basically, you've been kidnapped as a celebrity, and you're rescued by the Secret Service, and there's this mad pre-title sequence that, you know, emulates the Bond films where you're spirited away onto a toboggan and there's this dash down the mountainside in the Alps and there's a spectacular sequence and then you go sailing out over a cliff and plummet to your death. Well, that's unexpected.
And he could not have been nicer. He was just so lovely, and I'm so glad he was great because I love Star Wars. I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and it wouldn't have been terrible if he was horrible, you know, but he was absolutely lovely and he was so generous, and he just said, of course, yeah, that's no problem at all.
I was genuinely like a dog with two tails when I got an email from Luke Skywalker to say, yep, I really like what you've drawn, Dave. You know, that was great. We're all swimming in the same fan soup, you know.
I always liked the idea of, we saw James Bond do all these cool things. We saw him kind of, like I said, save us from nuclear subs that had been stolen and all this kind of thing, or we saw him in space and all that, but we never actually saw him go to the shops, and we never saw him visit his relatives, and we never saw his house. I love to kind of look behind the scenes of these things. Like, I love to subvert the genres. Like Kick-Ass was interesting because he was a superhero who you took powers away from, and that made him unlike any other superhero. Like, he couldn't climb walls like Spider-Man, he didn't have money like Batman and everything. So I like the idea of subverting Bonds by making him more human. And it's about a very, very nice guy who's in the Secret Service who takes this young guy under his wing and trains him up to be James Bond. So just like Pretty Woman, where Richard Gere showed Julia Roberts how to use the cutlery and everything, you've got the boy teenage male fantasy of that, you know, where you aren't just playing Medal of Honor every night, you're actually doing this for real and you're getting to go out there and protect your country, you know. And I thought there was something interesting about that, you know, and that's the kind of the foundations of what the thing's about.
For Harry, or Jack as he's called in the comic book, he had to have a nobility. He had to have a slightly larger than life feeling about him. And I think he realised that he was slightly larger than life. And I think Gary, or Eggsy, reminded him of this. So in the interplay between them, he was kind of acting with a little bit of a wink. It was like, I know you get this because I got it. But again, he has to be a contrast to Eggsy. He has to be super cool at all times, where Eggsy gets flustered and misbehaves and can't quite hack it. But again, he can empathise with Eggsy because he has been there. So I think when I was drawing him, I wanted to make him suave, well-dressed, somewhat impassive, but with little telltale giveaways that just made you like him. You had to like him.
So the idea of maybe making this guy a little bit lonely, you know, and he maybe has a slightly dysfunctional relationship with his family and everything, that seemed really interesting to me because that's what it would be like. And if you were related to a Bond-style guy, you wouldn't really be told the truth about what he did, but you'd have a vague idea you had this interesting uncle who drifted into your life occasionally. So that was the kind of origins of his character, like what James Bond would be like outside of the movies.
When I drew Eggsy in the comic, he's called Gary in the comic, but Eggsy I think is a great name for him. It's strange you do it almost on a subliminal level, the expression you show at certain points in the story, the way he stands. It's one of the things you can do in a comic. You can't have tone of voice, but you can have body language. And I could see him quite clearly. I mean, I maybe almost was that kid. I've certainly known people who are that kid. And I felt a lot of empathy, from a lot of warmth for him, you know. I felt that he was a good guy, he was a good character. And that's how I tried to draw him.
He's a lot like me when I was that age, you know. I wasn't as cool as that, you know, but I was slightly scuzzy and everything, you know, and it was just a little guy who sort of dreamed of something cool happening to him, you know. I wanted somebody who had a good heart and wanted to do something good with his life, but hadn't been given any opportunity, you know? So I think fundamentally that's what it's about. It's about maximising the potential of even the person you've written off. And Eggsy epitomises that really, because he goes from being somebody you would cross the street to avoid to somebody who's deactivating a laser beam to stop Britain being destroyed one day.
You know, for me, comics is about telling stories. I love to tell stories, and it's all about telling stories that you haven't told before, or if you've done something similar, to take it through a completely different process. So Secret Service, yeah, ticks that box of working with somebody I want to work with and working in a genre that I haven't worked in before.
I think a great lesson I learned actually about 10 or 12 years ago when my career really started to sort of take off was to write something that I want to see or I'd want to read. Before that, I'd always try to second guess an audience and think, okay, what's the current trend, or what would people like, you know, what would they be most likely to buy? Then I thought, I don't care about everybody else, you know, I'm just going to do something for me, you know. And it was transformational, you know, because then suddenly I was loving what was coming back. I was like, oh, this is something I'm into. And then because I'm into it, just by the law of averages, some other people are going to be into it too, and it grew from there. Just do something that you love, and other people are going to love it too.
Okay, for a rehearsal, please, the entire scene.
I mean, this is the fourth adaptation of a book that I've worked on, and it never gets anything other than 100% exciting. You know, like it's a bit like, you know, you keep having children, and it's not like you like the fourth one any less than you like the first three. You know, and if anything, this is slightly more exciting because they've thrown so much money at this. I mean, the budget for this is about 3.5 times what Kick-Ass was. And just walking around all the sets is incredible. You know, one impressive set is enough to make me happy, you know, but there's like 10 impressive sets here. Samuel L. Jackson, you know, it's nuts.